It was a regular afternoon in the city, the kind of day when school had just ended, and groups of teenagers filled the streets with laughter and noise. The sun was starting to go down, painting the buildings in warm orange light. The air smelled faintly of fried food from the little corner store that everyone liked to hang out near. A group of 5 teens stood outside that store, leaning against their bikes, passing around a bottle of soda and teasing each other. They weren't bad kids, just bored, restless, full of energy, and looking for something to make them laugh. One of them scrolled through his phone while the others talked about the latest game, the newest videos online, and weekend plans that probably wouldn't happen. Across the street, near the bus stop, sat a man most people didn't pay attention to. He looked to be in his late 50s, maybe older. His beard was gray, his jacket torn at the sleeve, and beside him was a small bag, probably everything he owned. In front of him was a piece of cardboard with shaky handwriting that said, "Just trying to get by." Anything helps. He didn't ask people for money out loud. He just sat quietly, his eyes following the cars that passed by as if he was lost in thought. Every so often, someone would drop a coin or a sandwich in front of him. He'd nod politely, always saying, "Thank you," in a soft voice. The group of teens noticed him after a while. One of them pointed and said, "There he is again. That same guy who's always sitting there." Another laughed. "Yeah, I've seen him for months. Doesn't he ever move?" They started making little jokes. Nothing too cruel at first, but enough to make themselves laugh. They didn't really think about what they were saying. They were just being loud, showing off to each other, like teenagers often do when they think no one's paying attention. Then one of them said, "Hey, what if we record him? Like a funny clip, we could post it. It'd get views." The idea seemed funny in the moment. They didn't think about how it would feel for the man. They didn't think at all. It was just something to do, something to make them laugh for a few minutes before going home. So they crossed the street. The man looked up as they approached. His eyes were calm but tired, and there was something about the way he held himself, quiet, almost gentle, that didn't match what they expected. He gave them a polite nod as if to say hello. "Hey, old man," one of the teens said, smirking. "You just sit here all day, huh?" The man didn't answer. He just smiled faintly and said, "I'm just waiting for better days." The group laughed. One pulled out his phone and started recording. Another tossed an empty chip bag near his feet. "Maybe if you got a job, you wouldn't have to wait," one of them said. Still, the man didn't get angry. He didn't shout or tell them to go away. He simply looked down at the ground for a moment, then said quietly, "I had one once." His words were soft, almost lost under the noise of passing cars, but the boy holding the phone caught it. "You had one?" he repeated with mock surprise. "What happened, huh? Did you lose it because you were lazy?" The others laughed again, but this time the laughter was thinner, weaker. Even they could sense something uncomfortable in the air. One boy at the back of the group didn't laugh. He just stared at the man, feeling a small knot in his stomach. The man didn't say anything else. He just sat still, looking straight ahead. His eyes were quiet but not angry. There was something different in them, something that didn't fit the picture the teens had imagined of a homeless man. The boy who wasn't laughing spoke up softly. "Come on, let's go." "This isn't funny," but the one with the phone ignored him. "What's your name, old man?" he asked, still recording. "You waiting for someone to come pick you up? Maybe a job fairy?" The man finally turned his head, meeting the teen's eyes. He didn't look offended. He didn't even look sad. His voice was calm when he said, "You don't have to do this, son." For a moment, the teen froze. Something about the way he said it, not angry, not bitter, just calm and real, made the air around them change. The man continued, "One day you'll understand how much it matters to be kind even when no one's watching." The laughter stopped completely. The street noise seemed louder now. Cars, footsteps, the hum of a bus pulling in. The boys stood there awkwardly, unsure what to say. The one holding the phone lowered it slowly, pretending not to feel anything. He forced a laugh and said, "Whatever, man." But his voice didn't sound as confident as before. The boy at the back tugged at his friend's sleeve. "Let's just go," he said again, more firmly this time. They walked away, crossing back to the other side of the street. None of them spoke for a few minutes. The one who had recorded the video looked down at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. He watched the short clip, The man sitting there, their own laughter echoing in the background, and then that calm voice saying, "You don't have to do this." He didn't laugh this time. He just locked the screen and shoved the phone in his pocket. The group went back to joking after a while, trying to shake off the strange silence that had followed them. But something about that moment stayed with all of them, even if they didn't admit it out loud. Later that evening, as the boy walked home, the words echoed in his head. "You don't have to do this." It wasn't just what the man said, it was how he said it. There was no anger, no attempt to make them feel guilty. It was as if he genuinely cared, even though they had mocked him. And that thought didn't sit easily in the boy's chest. He passed by the same corner the next day on his way to the store. The man was still there sitting quietly, holding the same cardboard sign. But this time the boy noticed things he hadn't seen before. The way the man's hands shook slightly when he picked up his cup. The small patch on his jacket that had been carefully sewn, probably by his own hand. He realized that this man wasn't just some homeless guy. He was someone who had lived, someone who had stories, someone who still had dignity even when life had taken everything else. The boy hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a few coins. He walked up quietly without his friends this time and dropped them into the cup. The man looked up, meeting his eyes again. That same calm, tired kindness was still there. "Thank you," he said softly. The boy nodded. "I'm sorry about yesterday." The man gave a small smile. "It's all right," he said. "Just remember, people aren't always what they seem." The boy didn't know what to say, so he just nodded again and walked away. But his steps were slower this time. He felt like something inside him had changed. A small thing maybe, but real. That night, when he met up with his friends, he didn't mention seeing the man. But when one of them joked about posting the video, he quickly said, "Don't, just delete it." The next morning came with the kind of soft gray light that makes everything feel slower. The streets were quieter than usual, and the air carried that damp smell that comes right after a night of light rain. The boy woke up early, still thinking about what had happened the day before. The words from that old man's mouth kept circling in his mind like a song that wouldn't go away. "You don't have to do this." He didn't know why those words bothered him so much. He had heard adults lecture him before, teachers, parents, even strangers on the bus sometimes. But this felt different. The man hadn't tried to shame him. He hadn't sounded angry. It was almost as if he cared. That was what confused him the most. Why would someone they had mocked care enough to say something kind in return? He sat by the window for a while, watching the cars go by. Normally, he would have grabbed his phone, played music, and scrolled through videos until breakfast. But that morning, he didn't feel like it. Something about those eyes, calm and tired, kept flashing in his mind. Later that day, after school, he walked past the same corner again. He hadn't planned to, but his feet carried him there anyway. The man was sitting in the same spot, his cardboard sign propped up beside him. People passed by without really seeing him, just like before. The boy stood across the street, unsure what to do. Part of him wanted to just keep walking. But another part, the part that hadn't stopped thinking about the man all night, told him to go over. He finally took a deep breath and crossed the road. The man looked up when he saw him coming. There was no anger in his face, only quiet recognition. "Hello again," he said in a gentle voice. "Hi," the boy replied, his voice low. I wanted to say sorry again. For yesterday," the man smiled softly. "You already said it," he said. "That's enough." The boy hesitated. I don't know why we did that. We thought it was funny, but it wasn't." The man nodded, his gaze drifting toward the passing traffic. "Sometimes people laugh when they don't know what else to do," he said. "It doesn't make them bad. It just means they haven't learned yet." The boy didn't know how to respond. He sat down on the curb a few feet away, feeling strange but comfortable at the same time. After a moment of silence, he asked quietly, "How long have you been out here?" The man smiled again, not sadly, just gently. "A few years now," he said. "Time moves different when you're outside. Some days feel short, some days feel like forever." The boy frowned. "Don't you have anyone? Like family or something?" The man took a slow breath. "I did once. I had a wife, a daughter, and a house. I used to fix cars for a living. I had a small garage, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. Then one day things started to fall apart." The boy listened quietly. The man's voice wasn't heavy or full of self-pity. It was just calm, steady, like someone telling a story they've already made peace with. I had an accident, the man continued. Broke my leg pretty bad. Couldn't work for months. The bills piled up. My business went under. And when you can't work, people stop calling. Friends disappear and family tries to help. But only for so long. I lost everything slowly, piece by piece. He paused for a moment, staring at the cup beside him. One day I looked around and realized I didn't have a home anymore. Just this bag and the clothes I was wearing. The boy didn't speak. He couldn't. He had never thought about how easily life could unravel like that. The man noticed his silence and gave a small chuckle. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. I'm still here. I still wake up every morning. That means something. The boy nodded slowly. Do you ever get angry? You know, at people, at how things turned out. The man looked thoughtful. Sometimes. I'm human, but anger doesn't fix anything. People cross the street to avoid me. Some throw insults, some throw things. But every once in a while someone stops and talks, and that makes all the difference. He smiled again, this time more warmly. Like you did. The boy's chest tightened a little. I don't think I did anything. You stopped, the man said. That's something. They sat in silence for a while, watching people go by. A few tossed coins into the cup. Some didn't even look. But for the boy, the city suddenly looked different. Every person that passed seemed to be carrying their own story, their own struggle. He had never noticed before. When he finally stood up to leave, he said, I'll see you again tomorrow, okay? The man nodded. I'll be right here. The boy walked away, but this time there was no guilt. Just a quiet determination he couldn't quite explain. That night, he told his friends what had happened. They were sitting at their usual spot near the convenience store when he said, I talked to that guy again. They looked up, surprised. What guy? One asked. The man we messed with. You mean the homeless dude? Another said, laughing awkwardly. Why would you talk to him? Because he's not what we thought, the boy said. He used to have a job, a family. He lost it all after an accident. He's not just some random guy. The group went quiet. No one cracked a joke this time. One of them kicked at the dirt and said softly, I kind of felt bad that day too. Yeah, another added. We were jerks, the boy nodded. He didn't even get mad. He just said we didn't have to do it. I keep thinking about that. For the first time in a long while, they all sat quietly. No jokes, no phones, just the hum of cars passing by. It felt strange, like they were all thinking the same thing but didn't know how to say it. Finally, one of them said, we should go back. Maybe do something for him. The boy looked up, surprised but relieved. Yeah, he said. I was thinking the same. They spent the next day after school gathering what they could. One brought some sandwiches from home, another brought an old blanket, and someone else chipped in a few dollars. It wasn't much, but it felt like a start. When they reached the corner again, the man was sitting there just like before. He looked up as the group approached, a spark of recognition in his eyes. The boy stepped forward first and said, we brought you some stuff. It's not much, but we wanted to help. The man looked at the food and the blanket, then at their faces. A gentle smile spread across his face. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. We know, the boy replied. But we wanted to. The man nodded slowly. Thank you. That means more than you know. They sat with him for a while, just talking. It wasn't awkward anymore. The man told them stories, funny ones about his time working at the garage, how he once fixed a car using nothing. The days that followed carried a kind of warmth the boy hadn't felt in a long time. Every afternoon, when the final school bell rang, he and his friends would walk together toward the same corner where the old man sat. It became a quiet habit, something unspoken yet meaningful. What started as guilt had turned into something deeper, though none of them could put it into words. The man would always greet them with the same gentle smile, no matter how tired he looked. He never asked for anything, never complained, never told them his full story unless they asked. He always listened more than he spoke, and somehow that made the boys talk more freely than they ever had with anyone else. One afternoon, the boy brought him a warm sandwich wrapped in foil. The man thanked him softly and began to eat. The boy sat on the curb beside him, watching people rush past without ever glancing in their direction. Do you ever wish people would stop and talk to you? The boy asked quietly. The man looked up, smiling faintly. Sometimes, but I don't expect it. Most folks are too busy surviving their own lives to notice someone else's. The boy thought about that for a while. That's sad, he said. The man nodded. It is, but it's also life. People don't mean to be cruel. They just forget that everyone's fighting their own battles, even the ones who laughed the loudest. The boy stared at the ground. He knew exactly what the man meant. His own laughter, the kind that came too easily when he was with his friends, often hid things he didn't want to think about, like the arguments at home, or the feeling of being invisible at school. After a few minutes, he said, "I think I laughed at you because I didn't want to feel small." The man turned his head, eyes soft. "We all do things like that sometimes," he said. "The important part is that you saw it and changed." The boy looked up. "You really think people can change?" The man chuckled. "If I didn't, I wouldn't still be sitting here." There was something so simple about the way he said it, yet it carried weight. The boy didn't need him to explain. He understood. As the sun dipped lower, the rest of the boys arrived, bringing with them laughter and a paper bag full of food. The man welcomed them like old friends, and soon the air was filled with chatter. One boy showed him a video on his phone. Another asked if he knew how to play chess, and before long, they were all sitting in a circle on the sidewalk, laughing like they'd known each other forever. The man told them about the cars he used to fix. His eyes lit up when he described the smell of motor oil, the sound of tools clinking, and the pride of seeing an engine roar back to life after hours of work. "I miss that sound," he said, smiling at the memory. "There's nothing like the first start after a long repair. It's like giving something a second chance." "Do you ever think you'll do it again?" one of the boys asked. The man paused, then nodded slowly. "Maybe one day. I still have the knowledge. Just need the tools and a place to work." The boy who'd first apologized leaned forward. "You could teach people," he said suddenly. "Like a class or something. Maybe at a community center." The man looked surprised. "You really think anyone would want to learn from me?" The boy shrugged. "Why not? You know more about cars than most people ever will." For the first time, the man didn't smile right away. He looked down, thoughtful, as if he hadn't considered that possibility before. "Maybe you're right," he said after a moment. "Maybe I could." From that day on, the visits took on a new purpose. The boys started asking him questions about engines, about life, about anything that came to mind. The man answered patiently, always taking his time to explain. It wasn't long before they realized he wasn't just wise. He was sharp, funny, and deeply kind. One day, while they sat together, a middle-aged woman passing by stopped and looked at the scene. The man surrounded by a group of laughing teenagers. She smiled and said, "It's nice to see young people spending time like this." The man smiled politely and said, "They're good kids." The woman nodded and dropped a few bills into his cup before walking away. After she left, one of the boys said, "You see that? She gave you money just because you were talking to us." The man laughed. "Maybe she thought I was keeping you out of trouble." That made them all laugh, but the boy could tell the man was genuinely touched. Later that week, they found him helping another homeless man fix a broken bicycle. The second man had been struggling with the chain, and the old mechanic had stepped in, using nothing but a stick and a hairpin to realign it. When the boys saw it, they couldn't help but cheer. "You really can fix anything," one of them said. The man wiped his hands and smiled. "You'd be surprised what you can do when you have no choice." The boy thought about that sentence for a long time. It made him realize how much he took for granted. Things like a roof, a bed, a meal. The man had none of it, yet he carried himself with peace, with gratitude for the smallest things. A few days later, while the group sat with him, the man shared something new. "You know," he said softly, "when I first ended up on the streets, I thought my life was over. I felt invisible. Then one night, a stranger gave me a blanket. Didn't say a word, just handed it to me and walked away. That small act changed something in me. It reminded me that I was still human." He looked around at the boys. "You all did the same for me. You stopped. You saw me. That's no small thing." The boy felt his throat tighten. "You saw us too," he said quietly. "We weren't exactly doing good things that day." The man smiled. "We all start somewhere. What matters is where we end up." For a while they just sat there in comfortable silence. The city noise faded into the background, the hum of cars, the chatter of passers-by, and all that remained was a feeling of understanding that went beyond words. As the weeks passed, The boys started noticing small changes in themselves.
They say,
Stopped mocking people at school. They began helping others, carrying groceries for neighbors, picking up litter, holding doors open for strangers. It wasn't something they discussed. It just became natural. One of the boys even told his mother about the man. The next day, she sent a bag of warm clothes and an old sleeping bag. When they gave it to him, the man's eyes glistened, though he quickly blinked it away. "Tell your mother I said thank you," he said softly. That evening, as they were getting ready to leave, the boy asked, "Do you ever think about your daughter?" The man's expression softened. "Every day," he said quietly. "She'd be grown now. Probably has a family of her own. Do you ever try to find her?" Another asked. He sighed. "I've thought about it, but I wouldn't want her to see me like this. Maybe one day when I'm back on my feet." The boy looked at him for a long moment, feeling something heavy in his chest. "You will," he said. "I believe you will." The man smiled, and for the first time there was a hint of hope in his eyes. That night the boys stayed up texting each other. One of them said, "We should help him get back on his feet." Like really help. They all agreed instantly. They didn't know how yet, but they wanted to try. Over the next few days they brainstormed ideas. One suggested starting a small online fundraiser. Another said they could talk to a local mechanic about giving him part-time work. It all sounded ambitious, but for the first time, they felt like they were doing something that mattered. The next time they met, they told the man their plan. He looked genuinely surprised, even a little overwhelmed. "You boys don't need to do that," he said. "You've already given me more than you know." But they insisted. "You helped us too," the boy said. "We just want to return the favor." The man's eyes softened. "You remind me of my daughter," he said. The weeks that followed felt like a quiet but steady transformation. Each day the boys would gather after school and meet the man on the corner. They had stopped feeling like they were doing something extraordinary. To them it had just become part of their routine, like hanging out at the park or playing video games. But there was a difference. Something deeper was happening, even if they couldn't explain it. The man who they had once mocked had become a presence in their lives, someone they relied on for more than just his stories. He had become a teacher in the most unexpected way. One afternoon, as the group sat on the curb beside him, they started talking about their plans for the summer. School was about to let out, and with it came the promise of free time. For most of them, it meant long hours in front of screens or hanging out with friends, but for the boy it felt different. "I think I want to do something more this summer," he said, looking at the man. "Maybe like help out in a way that matters." The others looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" one asked. "I don't know," he shrugged. "I just keep thinking about what we've been doing here. Helping the man with his work and talking to him. It just feels right, you know?" The man smiled faintly, his hands resting on his knees. It's funny how sometimes the smallest actions can end up meaning the most. Helping is a lot more than just giving money or stuff. It's about showing up when it counts. The boy nodded, taking that in. "Maybe we can do something like that. Not just for you, but for other people too. Like a project or something." The man looked down the street as if considering something. "You know, a long time ago I used to teach kids how to fix things, how to take care of their cars. I loved it. It wasn't just about teaching them how to turn a wrench. It was about showing them that they could make things work with their own hands, that they could fix what seemed broken." "You taught people how to fix cars?" The boy asked, his eyes wide. "That's awesome." The man nodded, but his smile faded a little. "Yeah, but that was before everything changed. But sometimes I still get a sense that I could do something like that again. If I had the chance." The boy thought for a moment. "Maybe you could teach us." The man raised an eyebrow. "Teach you? You sure you'd want to learn from someone like me?" The boy grinned. "Why not? We've been learning a lot from you already." The man chuckled. "Well, all right then. We'll start small, but don't expect me to go easy on you." The group laughed, feeling the familiar, easy bond between them. But there was something new in the air. This wasn't just about having fun or passing the time anymore. This was about learning, growing, and building something that felt real. Over the next few days, the group started meeting at the man's corner after school, just as they had before. But now they had a goal. The man would teach them small repairs, fixing bicycle tires, replacing fuses, patching up small things around the neighborhood. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like real work, the kind of work that made you proud when you finished. One day, as they were fixing an old bike, the boy turned to the man and asked, "Do you miss teaching?" The man paused, wiping his hands on an old rag. "Yeah, I do. But I think what I miss most is the feeling of seeing someone get it, you know? That moment when it clicks for them, when they realize they can do something they didn't think they could." The boy nodded. "Yeah, I get that. It's like when you finally get a game strategy or learn something in school that seemed impossible at first." "Exactly," the man said, smiling. "It's the same feeling." It wasn't long before the group had fixed up a few bikes and they started getting requests from other people in the neighborhood. People would stop by and ask if the boys could help with small jobs: a broken door, a leaky faucet, a punctured tire. They didn't always know what they were doing, but the man was always there to guide them, teaching them the basics, giving them confidence. It was nothing big, but it felt like it mattered. One afternoon, as they were sitting on the curb, the man said something that made the boy pause. "You know," the man said, looking out at the street, "sometimes people think that what they do has to be big to count. They think if it's not flashy, it's not worth doing. But that's not true. It's the small things that matter the most." The boy looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "What do you mean?" "I mean, fixing a bike for someone who doesn't have the money to take it to a shop, or cleaning up a park that's been neglected. Those are small acts, but they change things. They make someone's day a little better, and they show the world that you care, even if it's in a small way." The boy thought about that for a long time. It was true. So many people got caught up in trying to do big things, thinking they needed to change the world. But maybe, just maybe, it was the little things that made the most difference. As the summer stretched on, the group found themselves spending more and more time with the man. They would gather at his corner after school, helping him with whatever he needed, but also just talking. The conversation started to shift. They talked about dreams, about what they wanted from life, about what they hoped to become. They even shared fears they hadn't voiced before. The man listened to all of it without judgment, offering advice when he could, but mostly just offering an ear. He never made them feel small or naive, even when they talked about things that seemed impossible. It was clear to them that he believed in them, even when they didn't believe in themselves. One day, as they were sitting together, the boy turned to him and asked, "Do you ever regret anything?" The start of the school year brought with it the usual rush: new schedules, homework, and the chatter of students catching up after summer. But for the group of boys, everything felt different. The summer had left a mark on them, a quiet reminder of lessons learned in the most unexpected place. A street corner with an old man who had once seemed invisible. The boy who had first apologized felt it most. Every time he passed the corner on his way to school, he glanced toward the man's usual spot, expecting to see him there. Some days he was, some days he wasn't, but it no longer mattered if the man was there. What mattered was what he had taught them. One afternoon, the group gathered at their usual meeting place, the corner by the convenience store. They were quieter than before, not in a bad way, but thoughtful. Each of them carried small packages, sandwiches, warm clothes, and a few coins. Even though the man hadn't asked for anything, they had learned that giving wasn't about obligation. It was about choice. When the man arrived, he greeted them as usual, calm and gentle. But there was a light in his eyes they hadn't seen before. It was the kind of light that comes from hope, from knowing that things can still get better even after hardship. "Hello, boys," he said softly, setting down his bag. "You've been busy, I see." The boy smiled. "We've been trying, not just for you, but for the neighborhood too." The man looked around at the small group of children playing nearby, the park that had been cleaned up over the summer, the repaired bikes leaning against the curb. "I can see it," he said. "You've done good work." One of the boys, who had been quieter than the rest, spoke up. "We wouldn't have done any of this without you." The man shook his head. "I didn't do much," he said. "I just showed you the small things that matter. You did the rest." The boy who had first apologized thought about that for a long moment. The man was right. It hadn't been about him. It had been about what they chose to do. They had learned that helping others wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about noticing people, noticing needs, and acting on them. Over the next few weeks, they continued their routine. They would meet the man after school, bring what they could, and help with small repairs or cleanups. But the man also began sharing more stories from his past, stories that painted a picture of a life full of laughter, love, and hard lessons. He told them about his daughter, who had been his pride and joy, and about his wife, who had been a partner in everything. He told them about the garage he had run and the customers who had become friends. And then he told them about the accident, the medical bills, and the slow unraveling that had brought him to the street. The boys listened, rapt. They had heard hardship before, but hearing it from someone who had lived it, someone who had survived it without bitterness, was different. It was real. One afternoon, as they sat repairing a neighbor's fence, the boy asked quietly, "Do you ever wish things were different?" The man paused, leaning on his hands. "Of course," he said. "I think about what could have been, the mistakes I made, the chances I didn't take. But wishing doesn't change anything. What matters is what you do now with the life you have." The words hit the boy harder than he expected. He had spent so much time worrying about mistakes he had made, about moments he wished he could take back. And yet here was a man telling him that the present was what counted, that he could choose what to do with it. It wasn't long before the boys decided to take their help a step further. They had learned so much from the man: how to repair things, how to notice the small details, how to show kindness without expecting anything in return. They wanted to share that with others. They approached the local community center and asked if they could organize a small workshop. They wanted to teach kids basic repairs and show them that helping others could be simple, rewarding, and important. The staff were skeptical at first, but when they saw how organized and passionate the boys were, they agreed. The man helped too, of course. He taught the boys how to plan, how to explain things clearly, and how to make the workshop engaging. When the first day came, the boys were nervous, but the man stood beside them, quietly encouraging, never taking the spotlight, just guiding. The workshop was a success. Children learned to fix bikes, patch fences, and repair broken toys. But more importantly, they learned that helping others didn't have to be complicated or expensive. They learned that kindness could be practical, hands-on, and contagious. Watching the children laugh as they worked, the boys felt something swell inside them. Pride, yes, but also gratitude. They were grateful for the man who had taught them, for the lessons they had learned, and for the chance to pass that knowledge on. One afternoon after the workshop, the man turned to the boy who had first apologized and said softly, "You've grown a lot, you know." The boy looked at him, unsure how to respond. "I guess, maybe," he said. "You've learned to see people," the man said, "to notice what's around you and to act. That's more than most people ever learn." The boy swallowed, feeling a lump in his throat. "We couldn't have done it without you." The man smiled gently. "Maybe, but you chose to change. That was always up to you." Over the following months, the man's life began to improve in small ways. People in the neighborhood, inspired by the boys' workshops and his quiet presence, began offering small jobs, donations, and even friendship. He was still living simply, but he was no longer invisible. People knew him, respected him, and some even became friends. The boys continued to visit him, but the visits became less about guilt and more about connection. They shared their own stories now, about school, family, hopes, and fears. The man listened, offering advice when he could, but mostly just offering understanding. One chilly autumn afternoon, as they sat on the curb together, the boy asked, "Do you ever think about leaving this corner? Starting fresh somewhere else?" The man looked thoughtful. "Sometimes," he said. "But this corner, this neighborhood, it's become home again. Not because of the streets or the buildings, but because of people like you, because of the connection we've built. I've learned that home isn't always a house. Sometimes it's the people who see you, who care about you, and who let you be human." The boys nodded, understanding more than they could say. As the year moved forward, the workshops continued. More children came, more neighbors noticed, and the man found purpose again. He wasn't just surviving. He was living, contributing, teaching, and being seen. The boys also changed. They became leaders among their peers, quietly influencing others to notice kindness, to act when someone needed help, to treat people with respect. They didn't brag about it, and they didn't need to. The change was in them, visible in the way they carried themselves, the way they spoke, and the way they chose to spend their time. One day, as the boys sat with the man, one of them asked, "Do you ever think about your family again?" The man's eyes softened and he nodded. "Every day. I think about my daughter. I think about my wife. But I also know that I've been given a second chance in a different way. I've lost some things, yes, but I've gained too. I've gained connection, purpose, and hope. That counts for something," the boy smiled. It counts for a lot. And it did. As the sun set over the neighborhood, casting long shadows across the streets and the park, the man and the boy sat together, sharing laughter, memories, and quiet reflection. They were no longer just a group of teenagers and a homeless man on a corner. They were friends, teachers, and students of life, learning from each other in ways they hadn't imagined. The boy who had first mocked the man remembered that first encounter vividly. The fear, the embarrassment, the surprise at the man's calm response. It had been a turning point, a moment that could have ended in shame or anger, but instead became a beginning. And in that moment, he realized something important. The power of one act of kindness, the courage to see people as human, and the choice to act with empathy could ripple through lives in ways no one could predict. The man had been the teacher they didn't know they needed, and in turn, they had reminded him of what it meant to be seen, to matter, and to hope again. It wasn't a story about heroics, wealth, or fame. It was a story about ordinary people, teenagers and an older man, choosing kindness, choosing respect, and choosing to connect. And in that choice, they had all been changed forever. And as the night settled over the city, the boy knew one thing for certain. They would never forget the lessons learned on that corner. The laughter, the mistakes, the quiet moments, the small acts of giving, it all mattered. And the man who had once seemed invisible would always be remembered not for what he had lost, but for what he had taught them about life, humanity, and the simple power of seeing someone as a person. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the ground, thinking carefully. "I regret a lot of things," he said finally. "I regret losing touch with my family. I regret not fighting harder to keep my business. But at the same time, I don't regret the people I've met along the way, the things I've learned. I've seen a lot of hardship, but I've also seen a lot of kindness, and I think that makes up for a lot of the regrets." The boy nodded. "I get that. I think we're all trying to figure out what matters." "What's worth doing?" The man smiled softly. "You'll figure it out. You'll find your way. Just don't forget to look for the small things, the good things, even when it's hard." That was something the boy would never forget. As the summer came to a close, the group felt different. They weren't the same kids who had walked by the man's corner all those weeks ago, mocking him and making jokes. They had learned something real, about kindness, about seeing people, about the power of small actions. It wasn't a lesson they had been taught in school or at home. It was something they had learned together, through their time spent with the man who had once been invisible to them. One afternoon, as the man was preparing to leave for the day, the boy turned to him. "We're going to miss you," he said. "I don't know if you know this, but we've learned a lot from you. More than we ever expected." The man looked at him, a soft smile playing on his lips. "You boys have taught me too. You reminded me of something I forgot, that people can still care even in a world that feels broken sometimes." The boy felt a lump form in his throat. It was hard to explain, but he knew this moment was important. This summer, this time with the man, had changed him. It had changed all of them. They had come to see the world differently, not because they had done something grand, but because they had chosen to care in small, meaningful ways. As they said their goodbyes that afternoon, the boy felt a deep sense of gratitude for the man who had taught them more than they could ever repay. He had shown them that even in the hardest of times, there was kindness to be found, if you were willing to look quietly. She had that same stubborn kindness. The group smiled, and one of them joked, "Guess you're stuck with us now." He laughed. "I could think of worse company." And so they began their small mission. It wasn't easy. They didn't have much money, and convincing adults to help wasn't simple either. But they didn't give up. Every little bit they gathered went into helping the man. They printed flyers for odd jobs, asking if anyone needed car repairs, small fixes, or help cleaning. Slowly, people started responding. The man began working again, little by little. At first, he earned just enough to buy food and a few supplies. But to him, it wasn't about the money, it was about fee.